Hello, everyone. Hello, Sphinx family. Hello, everyone that's here. Even though I can't see your faces and I wish I could, you're in my heart and you're with me in spirit. I'm Titus Underwood. I'm the principal oboe of the Nashville Symphony, also associate professor of oboe at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. Today, the title, or just to explain the title of our panel here, Sticking Points with Strings Attached, Conducting Change, Leading from Traditional Seats, the present and future role of music directors, concertmasters / section leaders in evolving traditions. One thing we want to really talk about is we're going to really get into the weeds and talk about how we can make change and what does that look like. But before I do that, I would like my panelists, my lovely panelists and all their beautiful faces to please introduce themselves so everyone can get to know you.
Hi, I'm Alex Carr. I am concertmaster of the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, former concertmaster of Cincinnati Orchestra, Royal Concertmaster Orchestra, and I'm also a professor of music at Indiana University's Jacobs School of Music.
Hey everybody, my name is Tito Muñoz. I'm the music director of the Phoenix Symphony, a family member of Sphinx. I've been working with Sphinx for quite some time and always proud to represent. And I'm just happy to be here. Thanks, Titus, for the invitation.
Hi, I'm Constantine Orbelian, music director, principal conductor of New York City Opera, previously the general director and artistic director of the Armenian National Theater of Opera and Ballet, and before that, Moscow Chamber Orchestra for 20 years, and also the Kaunas City Symphony Orchestra in Lithuania. All great to be with everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for your beautiful introductions. We have, as you can see, we have some veterans in here, so we're going to have a great discussion today. I want to lead off with our very first question, and Alex, I would like to go to you first for this question. And after that, if others want to hop in and add on that, I would love for you to add on this question as well, answers to it. Do you think orchestras are ideologically ready to evolve, and what does that look like exactly?
I think it depends on what you talk about ideologically ready to change. I mean, I think that we are ready to change. I think we already have been evolving for quite some time. But I think that when we talk about change, we have to say, okay, what is that change? First of all, how do orchestras look right now? If we're talking about creating a more diverse atmosphere and a diverse orchestra setting itself, then I think, again, we have to start with education. I think anything else is putting a Band-Aid on a cancer. I think that we constantly self-aggrandize ourselves, and we're so happy about ourselves for being enlightened. But the fact is that we have to, in order to create change, we have to do it at the ground roots level. And that involves getting instruments into the hands of kids from diverse cultures at the earliest age and with great teachers. I think that's incredibly important. We can also say, okay, what kind of changes do we want to make to orchestras? Do we want to change what we wear? That's the superficial things. But I think inherently, one of the things that orchestras has to do is they have to sort of come into the 21st century and realize that in order to keep our public, we are going to have to evolve. The days of sitting back and dialing it in are over. We have to meet, we are inherently, though an inspired version of it, we are entertainment. And we have to bring our audiences in, and we have to inspire them by the way we play and how we act on stage, and realizing that we are entertaining these people from the moment they walk into our hall to the moment that we get off of the stage. And I think that if we start to realize our function and realize how we want ourselves to be viewed, then we can actually start ideologically changing the scene.
I want to follow up something with you with that, Alex. And beautiful answer. I want to ask, what is the incentive? Like, how do you get people energized to show up to work, like you said, to not dial it in? How does that inspiration happen? How do you have a shared vision? Like you said, we're entertaining people at the end of the day. So if it is in fact entertainment, does everyone share that idea? And if that idea is not shared, like, how do we get on the same page? Because it's easier to dial it in than to actually have a shared vision of what we're going for. What's the incentive to get us to do that?
Ownership. I think that people have to feel ownership for what they are. I think we always talk about the separation between management and orchestra, the separation between conductor and orchestra. And we fail to realize that inherently we are all in this boat together. We own, as players, we own what's going on. Yes, the conductor is working with us and sharing his or her vision with us, but inherently we are there to bring about that vision to the public. So we have to take ownership of that. We also have, when it comes to managements, We have to take ownership of the fact that our management is trying to promote us. We're trying to, we are inherently being promoted by them. So management has to look at us and say, we want to promote this project and we have to care about this product. We have to say, well, you know what? Our management's trying to promote us. What can we do to help them promote us? So we all are in this together. And if we don't have ownership, if a musician has lost the sense of purpose in their group, it's done. You're done. And that's when people start to dial in, and that's when audiences sense that there's a lack of commitment and therefore a lack of entertainment.
Good, great. Tito, Constantine, let me ask you, Tito, what would you add on that? I mean, coming from, I would like to hear from both music directors, right? When you're seeing something, because you can really shape a season, you can shape the way things evolve, the repertoire that's picked, and I know there's a lot more details into how that's going about, but let's start with Tito, then we're going to Constantine. What would that look like for you? How would we go about changing things and getting us in a unified front to go towards a goal that's putting us in the 21st century?
Well, I think it's interesting. The way the question is framed is as you put it earlier when we were talking, it was a little bit on the abstract side, because I think there's an implication about part of becoming more 21st century, just becoming more human, is diversifying our industry, I suppose is the word. I see it as community, because I think orchestras in a lot of ways are public spaces, or are spaces that need to be relevant to the community in ways that I think most musicians and maybe most administrators don't necessarily have in their thought process. We kind of are involved in a system that values comparisons to each other, that values a certain definition of what excellence, artistic excellence is, without kind of dissecting, what is a job description of a musician aside from just principal oboe, because that's it. That's the job description that's listed on the audition thing, and so I think to start off, for me, I think a lot of orchestras have to self-reflect and think about the ways they don't necessarily want to be like the New York Philharmonic, or like the 52-week orchestra that kind of is the ideal in our mind, because we're kind of conditioned to believe that. As a conductor and as a music director, even that position has problematic aspects to it as well, because there's this idea of what the music director isn't, what they can and can't do. But in the end, it's about community, and it's about fostering an atmosphere where there is creativity and there's an opportunity for people to have a voice. But that then also means that how are you recruiting people? How are you auditioning people? How are you onboarding people? So I think it's a really multifaceted idea that every orchestra is going to have to kind of come to terms with their own value, what they really believe in, how they want to be, connected with their community, how they want to serve their community, and what everybody's role is in that. What are the musicians' roles? And then, maybe a job description for a player is going to be very, very apparent and much easier to define than just section violin or principal oboe or whatever we kind of put in our usual auditions. So I think it's multifaceted for me in my view. And I think as a leader, there are ways to obviously implement certain things that are easy to change programming wise. Programming this music, programming that music, fine. But if you're still programming for the same audience that you have, that's just a Band-Aid. You're not really fixing a problem. You're not reaching out to other communities. You're not showing by doing why you are more inclusive and you really believe in serving other parts of your community.
I want to follow up with that. Let's go a little bit deeper. Do you feel that in general, that from the board to, say, for example, the music director, to the musicians, to the union, to all these organizations that we're part of, do you feel like they really think that there's any incentive or need to change? Would it help in any way? Is there some sort of bonus from doing that besides a moral nod? What is the what would that look like? Are people saying, hey, are they bursting at the seams saying, I really want different rappers? Can we have something besides the 3 Bs on the program? Are we having that type of vigor that's there, or is it just okay? We're working again. We're glad that we're back on stage. How do you feel that out, and how do you reach those other communities and put that need and that want inside the musicians and from the top down?
Well, it's interesting because there is a top down idea that you can't get away from, certainly in the system that we're in the way orchestras are structured. If you don't have it on the board, then it's not going to happen, obviously, because from the board down, that's where the priorities are, because then you're talking about how orchestras are funded and who's funding them and who's paying for it and who's buying the tickets. I mean, that becomes a very, very all-encompassing thing. I think it's both. You're going to get from the top down, from board, but you also, because of the way we have very, very strong union culture among musicians, for example. There needs to be grassroots efforts as well, because there are obviously a lot of musicians who want to see change in orchestras as well. And there's a lot of things that can be done contractually to create and foster that change. I mean, even things that might seem innocuous, like talking about artistic visioning, talking about what role musicians play in developing that forward thinking. It just doesn't have to be my vision. It just needs to be a vision that everybody believes in and everybody really has ownership for, because who's going to be in the orchestra 30 years from now? It's not me necessarily, it are the musicians, right? And so I believe that there is kind of this all-encompassing idea that it does need to happen grassroots for sure, but then there also needs to be a reckoning on the top side of things board-wise, because if the board doesn't see a need for this or desire for this, or the belief that diversifying our orchestra is actually better for the artistic product, it's better for the way we serve our community, then it's impossible, then it's not going to happen.
Constantine, I would love to go to you. What are your thoughts on what we've been building on, and also with New York City Opera, you do so many different types of operas as well. I mean, how do you see that? The change happening, different repertoire, different program hiring processes in your institution or institutions in general. How would you see it?
Well, since I'm fairly new to this particular institution, but this particular one, New York City Opera, has always had a great diversity of repertoire. So let's face it, there's all kinds of possibilities. But when the music is great, when it's wonderful, when it's written by talented people, composed by talented people, wonderful librettos and staging and everything else, people are going to love it. For instance, 1949, we did William Grant Still's Troubled Island. Who else was doing an opera by a Black composer in 1949? Nobody. And so we're resurrecting it. We're bringing it back in 2024 for the 75th anniversary of the date of the first performance, and so on and so forth. I just want to say that, everything we're talking about is the top of the, ice cream cone. We need to get down to education. Very thankfully, I lived in Russia for 20 years, and I still live there. I work in Russia, and I run a big festival in St. Petersburg inside the palaces and all these types of things. But, young people are brought into the concert hall from a very young age. And I think that's very, very important. I mean, when I was a kid living in San Francisco and I won the concerto competition, I played with the San Francisco Symphony when I was 12 and that sort of thing, and the whole school would come and all that. It was wonderful, but that can't just happen once a year. That can't just happen, once every blue moon. We need to really think very, very seriously about the educational aspect, how to give people an opportunity to be exposed. Once they're exposed, they love it. But when they're not exposed, they're afraid of it. And the same thing with opera, same thing with, the way we do small, 45-minute versions of Cenerentola or The Barber of Seville, or we've got a 45-minute Carmen when you have a little narrator. We had, for instance, in the park last summer, we did a hour and 15-minute Rigoletto with a fantastic narrator who explained the story, because obviously the whole opera is more than 45 minutes. But it's the exposure is so important. In the park, for instance, last summer we had 4,000 people in Bryant Park. So it's all a matter of exposure, education. Everybody loves it once they know it, once they hear it. As far as repertoire, as far as everything else, that comes with a little bit of elbow pushing, of course, to boards and all of that sort of thing. But again, when the music is excellent, when the compositions are compelling and wonderful and beautiful and something that's going to interest the public in various ways. Could be interesting because it's an experiment, interesting because it's touching, interesting because it's moving, whatever the interest is. I think that, we just need to expose people more and more, and we need to expose the boards of the orchestra more and more. Because when they hear, something by I don't know who, and they're afraid of it because it isn't one of the 3 Bs, they get nervous because who's going to buy a ticket? But if they know it in advance, if you plan as of course we all try to, 2 and 3 and 4 years in advance, it's a completely different story. But as far as hiring, firing, and unions, that's again a very different story as far as how things work in real life.
Right. And let me follow up with you. I mean, how could we, as far as the hiring, let's say retiring or gracefully moving on, because how would you work with those things that are pretty much deadlocked in the center, right? Because people ask for change or they demand it, but then there's these contracts, right? There are things that people say, see in the contract, it says this, and then someone says, I want to do this, but in the contract, there's a lot of contractual talk that happens when change is knocking at the door. How do you work with that? How do you negotiate with that when that dynamic is there?
It's a very difficult situation, as we all know, in any orchestra, when you actually have to let somebody go or somebody is not playing on the level that you need, especially if it's a soloist, if it's oboist in particular. Because
there's Titus.
I know it's coming at me. I feel personally offended.
There's only 2 oboists, right, in the orchestra. I mean, if you're in the violin section and there's 15 of them and there's 16 in the first violins, one can hide for a while. But an oboist, the first clarinetist, the first bassoonist, trumpet player, they can't hide. You can't hide. And you mess up once and everybody hears it. Violinist stops playing, you've got another 40 people playing at the same time and nobody's going to notice. But I have to say that it's a very difficult question, and it's a difficult moral question, because it's again a matter of opinion, right? If you think somebody's good or somebody's bad or somebody's playing sharp or flat, they think they're playing right, you think they're playing sharp. You take the little machine and you have to prove it to them, right? But I mean, it's a very difficult process because people's perception of themselves is always completely different than others' perception of them.
Right. Well, I want to expand on this. Now, I want to go to you, Alex, on this, and then we'll go into some of the questions that we see in the chat. With this being said, we talked about education, right? Putting the instruments in young people's hands. But let's go a little further and say, what about the education of us? Like you said before, we're entertainment. Of course, you've thought about this a lot, which means that you've come to that conclusion that's probably outside of what you would hear in a typical conservatory. Like, you don't go into conservatory and say, you're there to entertain. And like, okay, let me go entertain. We're talking about phrasing and the audition process and service to the music and of course, stage presentation. But it's not usually framed. And when we think of entertainment, we think of like, pop art when we think about entertainment. But we're classical art, How can we further our education? Because after you're tenured, right, and you're there, and you're just there until eternity, beyond and beyond, beyond. What are innovative ways that we can be educated on who our audience is, how things are changing, how society is changing, how technology is changing things? What would be some suggestions on that?
Well, I mean, think about it for a second. Think about the first time you went into a concert hall and think about what made you want to go back. If I look at orchestras that I love listening to, I look at the Berlin Philharmonic. Why do I like the Berlin Philharmonic? Okay, there are a lot of great players. But beyond that, there are a lot of great players in American orchestras too. What is it about the Berlin Philharmonic that I like so much? Well, they're engaged. They're engaged in what they're doing. You can feel that every single person is there and giving 100% every single night. And that for me is important because every single night I get on stage, I give my 100%. And there's a reason why. The reason I do that is, number one, I enjoy what I do. And I haven't forgotten that. From the very first moment I started doing it, I haven't forgotten how much I love doing it. But not only that, we're assuming all the time that we're just playing for board members who can afford to pay those tickets. But there are a lot of people that come to those concert halls that can't afford to be there, but do it because they love it so much that it takes them away from their lives for a little while. And so we forget that there are audience members that really can't afford to be in that concert hall and do so anyway because they want to be inspired. And if I don't give my 100% every night, I've lost them. I've lost that person coming into the hall. And then we keep talking about, okay, diversity. You know, and I'm going sideways, but I'm coming back to the point.
No, go there, please.
The point is, we sit there and we say, you know, when we talk about the NBA, we talk about the NFL. You know how many percentage of white people are in the NBA? 16.9%. Interesting, isn't it? It's about interest at a young age. The people from, like, I'm a Hispanic. For me, my mom's a pianist. I was involved in classical music from the time I was born. I was listening. My father's a guitarist. My mother's a pianist. I was listening to that since the time I was an infant. I could tell a Chopin etude from the age of 2. You know, I mean, and that's the thing. We need to get people in the hall and inspired. And a little kid isn't going to be inspired by people dialing it in. It's just not going to happen. So when we talk about getting people in order to get people from diverse cultures into concert halls to be our audiences and to be playing in those seats, we need to inspire them from a young age. And that's what I wish. You know, we all use our brains so much. You know, we talk about the greatest composers or the greatest administrators. Why can't we all get together and try to figure out how to get kids excited? First of all, to get them excited so that they want to play an instrument, and then to get them the instruments. You know, in Dallas, we have something called the South Dallas Initiative, which is trying to get instruments into the hands of kids that can't afford them. Violins aren't cheap. A clarinet is a lot cheaper than a violin. Violins aren't cheap and they're not easy to come by. Lessons aren't cheap. Lessons from great players are not, and great teachers are not cheap. These things are things that we can do. But in order to, we talk about getting the instruments in their hands. If they don't want them in their hands, they don't want them. So we have to first inspire them and then give them the means to do it. Whether they're going to become players in great orchestras or audience members. That's how we go about it. But I mean, as Constantine said, and I couldn't agree with any more than that, anything else is a Band-Aid. Anything else is like, you know, we talk about programming. Important, yes. But what's really important? What change do you really want to see? Is it just the programming? I think we really want to see, yes, the people, more composers, more conductors, more players. Is that what we really want to see? And then if we really want to see that, then we really have to create change, a real change, not just the superficial stuff, the frills on the side. We actually have to change the base root system.
I mean, do you think that, and this can go for anyone there, I want to go a little deeper on the program. Let's say, let's take the basketball example, right? Like, one is easier there, you know, basketball goes everywhere, but also there people see themselves there. And also there's a cultural affirmation that's there. I mean, there was a time where basketball was very, very white at one point. I mean, but now, I mean, if you take someone like an Allen Iverson, who completely changes the way that it looks, right? From the clothes that they wear to the way they walk into there, and to the things that they wear, the swagger that's there. How, in what ways can people be culturally affirmed so they can be a part of the art? But maybe the disinterest could be that they're culturally disconnected from what they're seeing, or they're not necessarily seeing themselves there. How can we encourage both the programming, right, and then putting the violins in their hands? What if the first piece that a kid learns, you know, from a Suzuki method is an adoration for Florence Price, right? But, you know, they're just kind of, you know, trying their best to get through it. It's a simple tune that's beautiful, that can stick in their mind. But from a very young age, if I think, even speaking for myself, if I would have known of a lot of these composers there, I did come from a musical family, but if I knew some composers that were there, maybe my interest wouldn't have waxed and waned as much. And I had gone to some of the best lessons and institutions, but sometimes I didn't feel like I was there. How do we when we hook them and they say, I like seeing you do this, right? Who is that composer? Who is this person that you're playing? There's Bach, and then there's Steele, and then there's Bonds, and then there's Brahms. you know, what place does that have in it? And anyone can hop in there and answer that, or else you can expound on, or whoever wants to hop in there and talk about that, like the instruments in the hands, the young age, the interest, keeping that interest.
Well, I mean, if I can just say that you have to offer it first.
Mm.
That's the main thing. And then you figure out, you know, not every kid is going to want to play an instrument. Not every kid is going to want to sit there and have a lesson. So you have to offer the instrument, offer the opportunity to have lessons and see who has the talent. I mean, who has the patience, who the internal interest and drive. And not only that, I think it comes a lot comes from the parents. If your parents are, you know, oh, what are you playing the violin instead of playing football? You know what I mean? It's a different, you know, not everybody is in agreement with, you know, the parents are not going to be so happy about playing a violin, or, you know, those early violin lessons are not the happiest thing to have in the household, right? So it's a matter of exposure. It's tolerance and understanding of the parents, I think, is very, very important. My mother used to take me at age 5 to the San Francisco Conservatory 5 times a week. 5 times a week, she would take me to my piano lessons. And I mean, that's Russian style. That's the way they do it in the old country. And, you know, and a year later I was playing concerts, you know, kids concerts, of course, and all that sort of thing. But nevertheless, it's a huge dedication of the parents. It's and giving them, you know, and then it's a huge process. That's all I can say. It's a huge, long, and very difficult process.
Mm.
If I can add, I think, you know, this is, I mean, all of this, Titus, I feel like can be, you know, answered with the concept that representation matters, you know, because in the end, if an orchestra has decided that it wants to take up the mantle of education, because, you know, a lot of what has happened in the United States is that the music education programs have dwindled, and of course they've dwindled the most in underserved communities and of course, because that's how it always goes. But you know, if an orchestra in a community has seen this need and said that this is the organization we want to be, we want to take up this mantle of providing this music education and then offering it, as Constantine aptly put it, you know, being able to have the resources to offer the instruments or whatever the case may be. But how do you you know, the example, Constantine, that you mentioned about understanding the parents, for example, you know, the way you understand the parents is that you have folks who've lived that experience, doing the teaching, doing the playing in the orchestra, representing what that is. It was an interesting situation for me. I'm an alum of the Music Advancement Program at Juilliard, which is a program at Juilliard on Saturdays that is for you know, Black and Latinx students, young musicians, and it was a pretty eye-opening experience to be in a situation that was, number one, very high level, because the faculty was very, very high level. I mean, this is Juilliard School, so it was, but the students came from all sorts of different places, all socioeconomic backgrounds, and it was interesting because, you know, you had a support system. You had parents who were meeting each other and going through the same learning process about what all of this was. My mom didn't know anything about classical music, you know, and so it's coming into a situation where she was meeting other parents who were going through the same thing, and then likewise other parents who were, you know, who were maybe a little bit more veteran about with classical music and with bringing their kids to things, and so you had that learning experience. If your orchestra is really trying to do a lot of community engagement in that sort of way, in education, in health and wellness, in the end, having that representation is going to be more engaging for anybody who's participating in those situations. So that's why I feel like the idea that the representation matters is so important, which is why in the end, you know, thinking about how you actually diversify the people on stage, why that's better, why that actually is going to make your organization better. It's because your values are actually aligned to that. They equal that. And so therefore, when you go out into the world and you want to serve, you're serving in the best way possible.
Right. And let's go a bit further about community, right? Because I've heard the term community quite a bit. I mean, do you think that we're actually when we're talking about community, someone is showing up to these concerts, right? Someone's there. I mean, otherwise, none of us would be on this panel and have a career to speak of. When we're talking about community and expanding the community, or talking about or presumptions of what we may think about other communities and what they may be interested in. It was just to kind of frame this, I was reading about Margaret Bond, and when she was doing some of her work, she would do it in these small theaters, and lots of Black people would show up to the concerts to see what she did. A lot of audiences don't necessarily understand the music or as educated about it as we are, or may not even know what the great pieces are outside of a Beethoven's Fifth or Dvorak 9 or a Messiah and just the Beethoven 9, like the ones that we see all the time. But a whole season that has, that will put a Schoenberg on there, right? Or a Philip Glass or a Barber Symphony. I mean, these things have to be played, right, in order for us to represent it, and how that's marketed from repertoire, from showing what your orchestra is changing, showing from your education program that's really changing. I mean, how could we really change this? Because I see that we're kind of bought into gradualism in some ways, right, where it's going to incrementally happen. What's like a really radical thing that can happen that will really switch or could it happen, for us to have a real radical change? Because we have community, and I'm not saying that the community that's there, we should push them out the hall, right? It's not saying you're not welcome. We want another community that's there. But how can we truly expand it and make it look like the cities that we live in? Because we're talking about community. Can we define what other communities and in a real way, how can we go about doing that besides just from the young level, but to people that are adults that may be interested and want to come to the hall, that may have passed it a few times downtown? Like, what ways do we do that? Anyone can jump in there and answer that.
One thing we did in Amsterdam, when I was concertmaster there, was that we had an open, like, part of our rehearsal was open every Wednesday at 12:30. Anybody could walk in and we would either run a piece, like, or we would actually run a piece and actually rehearse a bit. And that gave people, anybody who wanted to walk in. And of course, we're dealing with a pandemic situation. Post-pandemic, when things start to get back to normal, that's something to do. Just let people in, and just let them have a picture of what we are. And then, and we can also, when it comes to programming, I think we have to be a little bit, not as avant-garde, but I think if we want to be more avant-garde, then we should actually educate the audience on site. Meaning, we have a lot of pre-concert lectures and stuff like that, but even things like having things on screens or having somebody talk about the music on a screen before the piece is played, just to give an idea of people what they are listening to. Because sometimes I think what happens is, I think, was it Milton Babbitt that said, he wrote the
Who cares if you listen? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to that. And that's how I think we lost a lot of audience members, was because somebody decided to say something stupid like that. I think that if you're going to throw something that crazy, something that's avant-garde at somebody, I think you should help them digest it. And I think so we can promote change, but we also have to help people digest that change. I think it's unfair to just throw it at someone and say, take it or leave it. No, I think you should take it, but this is how.
I think also, sorry, go ahead, Constantine.
You're absolutely right. And also, I think that, relevant programming to events that really happened, I think are incredibly, it's very important to, depict events that actually took place. Stories are nice and all of that sort of thing. But, we're at New York City Opera, we've got the world premiere of The Gardens of the Finzi-Contini by Ricci and Gordon, story of an Italian family in Italy during Nazi, occupation and all of that stuff, terrible things that happened to them. And all performances are sold out. It's together with the Jewish Heritage Museum and so on and so forth. This summer, we're doing the Central Park 5 in Central Park. So it's the Anthony Davis, opera, and it's going to be, kind of amazing, I think. And it's a very relevant story, very relevant historical piece, and I do believe that it's going to be very, well attended and to the point. So I think that it's, we've got so many different options, and we have to start someplace. So, right, again, education, and more education.
Unless someone else wants to answer now, there's a question that I see in the, and maybe this would be for you, Tito, to answer this question. I see one that's in here. The last question popped up. It says, does it make sense to program? And this is switching, talking about programs, since we're going in that range. It says, does it make sense to program things that are relevant to the lives of the people we want in the audience? And Constantine, you kind of touched on this. So
Absolutely.
For example, 7 Last Words of the Unarmed, sung by Black and Latin folks for the community. What would you think about some of that kind of hits hard like that, right? That's provoking in a way.
I think
beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I think which is and the Joel Thompson piece is an incredibly moving and incredibly powerful piece. And I think the orchestra needs to ask itself why it would want to do that. Because it's easy to say, well, let's program the things, and that's a Band-Aid, right? I think, Alex, you mentioned that the idea that can be a Band-Aid if it's tokenism, if it's not, there has to be a reason why you're doing this, and especially with a piece like the Joel Thompson, who are you doing this for? In the end, because if the organization itself is not set up in a way that the values of what a piece is trying to say, if it's contradictory to that, then you're obliterating the message, and you're actually not really self-reflecting and learning anything internally as an organization. So while I think that that's obviously important, to program things that are relevant, and we think about that when we're in our programming phases, but at the same time also when it's dealing with things that are really raw in a current day, there needs to be a sort of an internal reckoning as to why you're going to do that. And for me, I struggle with that. I struggle with that as a Latino. I struggle with that even coming through the ranks as a conductor, because you can easily fall into tokenism if you let it happen. You can easily be either the Cinco de Mayo conductor or the MLK concert conductor, and people kind of put you in that place, and it's a very slippery slope. You can argue positive and negative aspects of it, but in the end, it's all about what is the organization doing and why, and why do they want to present this? Why do they want to say this? What is why? And so, I mean, ultimately, that's the question. It all for me boils down to what are the values of the organization? Why do you want to present this, and why do you want to say this story?
I want to ask something. This can go to anyone, and then outside. Go ahead, Allison. Then I ask.
It's funny. I wanted to suggest this to every single orchestra I've ever played in my entire life in the States, and I don't know why nobody's ever thought about doing it. But you have a piece like Handel's Messiah. It's done everywhere. I played it. I was the gig whore of the world playing that. I've played Handel Messiah for 5 people and chorus. I've done it in every way, shape, and form possible. Why has no one ever invited every church choir to come at the same time and do Handel's Messiah with an orchestra? If you want to talk about inclusion, music at the base level, churches. I mean, like whether it's a gospel choir or a church choir at a Catholic church. Handel's Messiah is an incredible work, but having diverse groups, diverse choruses from all over the city. You want to talk about getting your whole city in? That's a way to get your whole city in one fell swoop. You have 4 choruses of 100 people or 50 people or 25 people, but you get the whole city, and those parishioners that come to those churches come to the hall too. So that's one way to get like an entire city into your concert hall in 1 second, and no one ever does it. I just can't understand why no one's ever thought of doing something so ridiculously easy.
Well, you've given them the answer, Alex, right there. So probably you're going to see on some people's program a bunch of church choirs at the Messiah. One thing I wanted to expound on was, Tito, I wanted to dig, and Constantine, you can go for answer this as well, is I want to ask, you said what you said, if something is contradictory to what the organization is representing, what are we preserving? What are the institutions presenting? So we will have to define what we're presenting in the first place. Can we really define in classical music's current state, what is it promoting? What does it look like? Say, for instance, I'm just a layman on the street, right? And I'm just walking past the hall, and I'm just thinking it's just music that's there. So
Yeah.
why are some things played, some things not played, some things make people feel comfortable, some things make people feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, I mean,
What are we preserving?
yeah, I mean that gets into the elephant in the room for a lot of orchestras, which is that orchestras were made by white people for white people, and so you know, and that there's no, I don't think anybody can really dispute that. I mean, that's just what it is, and so therefore we've built this system was built in such a way that you then have to constantly reckon with this balancing act of the you know, work within the system that we've got to try to change it and amend it and make it better, or burn it all to the ground. You know, there's that dichotomy. And I actually, and the last panel you were on, Titus, I think kind of went into that topic a little bit with some amazing opinions and thoughts, you know, from people who have really been thinking about this. And because in the end, you know, it's easy to kind of be at a place of privilege and say, well, this is great and this is all fine and what we play is great and everybody likes Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky and Beethoven and the canon is great, and you know, the people that are in the orchestra, you know, we have the blind auditions, the people who are getting into the orchestras are just the best of the best, and everything, the status quo is okay. I think, if anything, this pandemic has taught us that even the status quo is fragile and is tricky to navigate. But you know, but in the end, when you're talking about these types of you know, this type of change, you know, I consider this is something actually Alex Lang, my principal clarinet in Phoenix, he's a wonderful friend of Sphinx as well, and he and I have a lot of these conversations, and he talked to me about this concept of you know, the orchestra being a like a public space, like a public park, you know, that you know, everybody who comes to Phoenix should view either our concert hall or just the Phoenix Symphony as like the place where they're going to find their people, the place where you can be at and you will feel welcome, you know that. And that's not the case. I don't think any orchestra, that's the case. And so, you know, so how do we then break down those barriers, to use a very cliche term, to create that sense of community? Maybe it means that it's not in the concert hall. Maybe it means that we're thinking about how we, our venue being the community, not just the one kind of place where everybody comes, because maybe that place is really not set up. It's really not conducive to creating that sense of community and creating that sense of that for everybody. I work sometimes with an orchestra based just outside of Paris, the Orchestre National de Île-de-France, which is one of the full-time orchestras in Paris, in the Paris area. But they have an interesting kind of mission. And their mission is, because there are already orchestras that serve Paris proper. The Orchestre de Paris, the Orchestre National de France, Radio France. I mean, they already have those orchestras doing that work. But they have this orchestra that's a wonderful orchestra, full-time, and their job is to play in the outskirts, in the little communities outside of Paris. They do one concert every cycle in Paris at the Philharmonie, but everywhere else it's just out in the community. So they have the place to rehearse, and then they just go out and perform. And that's just standard. That's what they do. They still perform at a high level. They still do all the things that they know that they can do. There's still this sense of pride and sense of ownership, as Alex talks about. You know, it's not just like, well, we only play in our main hall and that's it. No. That's their job, is they understand what that is. Somebody else asked the question of, should it be in contracts that, you know, El Sistema should be part of what musicians do as far as and I think he means education, specifically education. But yeah, you know, those are things that we can talk about and say, well, should it be in a CBA that, you know, a certain amount of time is actually education, and that's inherently part of a musician's job description? Maybe. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that are kind of going to create that sense of like when somebody walks by the hall or walks by the orchestra, they're like, oh, I want to be there. I'm going to gain something from this, and I'm going to be enriched by it. And I'm going to be, in a community.
Right.
If I can just say a couple of words, I think, what you're talking about and everything that we're talking about comes down to, when we're dealing only with sponsors and with fundraising and with, very small, interest from the government, national endowment, and all these things. They dumped it all on private enterprise, private donations, private people. Then we're kind of at the beck and call of those organizations that give us the money. At the same time, with my experience, and Alex, I'm interested to know about Amsterdam and how things work there, because you've got state sponsored, and in the reason we have, for instance, so many Shostakovich symphonies, or we have so many Prokofiev ballets, or we have all of this stuff in Russia. I'm saying we because I was living there, and my mother's Russian, and my dad was Armenian. But is because there was something called a composers union that was organized by the state, and the state allowed composers to write, and they wrote all these huge pieces because they got more money for them, and they were obliged to be performed. Any Soviet artist, any Russian artist coming across the border, they had to program. At least 25% of the program was composers by contemporary, Russian composers, Shostakovich, Prokofiev, Nyaskovsky, whatever it happened to be. But I mean, the fact that the government basically ignores the arts in the United States is I think, a very, very sad situation, because we are, again, just going and asking, the older generations or the corporate donors and all this stuff for money, and they want to know what we're doing. And it should not be that way, the way it is, I think. I think there should be that little niche where the government comes in and says, this is what we're giving you money for, to perform contemporary works. This is what we're doing for contemporary composers, that, we will help do these things. So I don't know. That's one point that I find very frustrating here.
I completely agree with you. And I think that also that goes into the saying of what orchestras are capable of doing. I think that we look at ourselves, and even that we're having this discussion, we self-flagellate. It's unbelievable. Orchestras or the arts, we beat ourselves up so much more than the average communities. It's amazing. We are evolving. It's taking time, and maybe it's taking too much time, but we are evolving steadily. Look at the orchestra landscape. Look how much it's changed. Look how few women used to be in orchestras. There was a point where in Europe, in certain orchestras, not a woman, not a person than white. Look, it wasn't that long ago where the Vienna Philharmonic was completely white men. Even there, it's changed. It is changing, and it needs to change more. But we are evolving. It's just taking some time. But Constantine's right. The fact that the government isn't involved, and the fact that it's done completely with private, and thank goodness for those donors. Thank goodness for those private donors that have supported us, because if it wasn't for them, we'd be dead. It would be over. So what can we do? Well, we can help try to diversify the landscape. We can try to be more adventuresome with programming. How? Well, I can tell you that, so in Amsterdam, this was what was fascinating. Amsterdam was kind of a co-op situation. The orchestra was in every facet of things. There were orchestra members on the board. There were orchestra members on the artistic committee. And so we were constantly involved with management, working together to figure things out. And so I'll never forget, every time I was, there was a certain series, the A series in Amsterdam, which was all dedicated to contemporary music. And I remember riding the tram to go to work, and every single time when I was playing for the A series, there was an older woman who would get on the tram, and she would sit next to me every single time. And I remember saying to her, "You only have tickets for the A series?" And she was probably about 85 years old. And she said, "Well, I had tickets to the B series, which was the great big composer series. And I did that for 55 years. And she said, "You know what? I've heard everything by now. I've heard Bruckner 7 25 times. I've heard, Tchaikovsky 6 100 times." She said, "I want to hear what's going on now." And I said, do you like it? And she said, a lot of it? No. She said, but at least it's something different. So I think that, you know, we have to provide something different. I think that we can provide adventuresome programming, but again, we have to do it. You know, we can't change who we are. I think that's one thing people do, and that never works. We can't change what we are as playing classical music. This is what we do. We can change the look. We can change certain aspects of it. But if we stray too far from the mission statement, which is to inspire through classical music, inspire and entertain and bring in these communities, I think we do a big disservice to ourselves.
I want to respond. Constantine, you brought up a great point with the help of, you know, government commissioning thing. But one thing I want to stick on was the 25%, right? If we're really unpacking that, what's happening is that things are being replayed over and over. Composers are getting known. And one thing that I like to think about is let's think about, if we're talking about composers, if we're talking about a Margaret Bunz, a Florence Price, a William Grant Steele, a William Dawson, right? If we're thinking about these composers, the same thing had to happen for Tchaikovsky for people to really mine his best works. We don't program everything that he wrote. Like, can someone hum me the tune to Mozart Symphonies 1 through 5? I don't know him.
He was 5 years old when he wrote those, right?
But the thing about it is, we did take his best works and put them on display so you can appreciate an earlier work, right? So if we're talking about, have we taken the time to really go through William Grant Steele's catalog, who wrote over 200 pieces? Have we really gone through Florence Price's pieces, or did we just do her symphony number 1, say, oh, this is not that great, so we're gonna let's move along? Maybe the thing that the audience wants is a certain experience, a scratch to be, to be itched, right? Because the thing we think about it is, if Tchaikovsky 4 serves a purpose emotionally about how it's written for the audience, so why not do a Florence Price third or a Negro Folk Symphony by Dawson? Like, I can get that same response from the audience by programming something different, even from living composers who, if you want it written in a certain way, say this is the thing that we're going for. Not saying trying to control what you're doing, but this is the itch we're trying to scratch for an audience that we're trying to bring in and bring them up to speed to things that may be more challenging, right? How can we do that and be more innovative with programming? I'm not saying that the orchestra needs to be a completely different thing, but programming, like Constantine said, they were funded and replayed, and these classics became classics. That's how Barber became a classic. That's how Shostakovich became a classic. And these are relatively new composers in the canon. So what can we do on our end, especially for music directors? Like, what can we do on our end to really go to that catalog? Because I know you're very busy people, and learning a full score is it's a real huge endeavor. You know, you have to be dedicated, you have to connect to it. What can you do to really dig in and find those hits, the great ones, like the Tchaikovsky's 4, 5, and 6, of a Price, of a Steele? What can we do to serve the audience with that need that they want to hear these types of works?
Well, I just think that it's again, exposure, and giving the people an opportunity to hear them. There's no other way to do it, right? I mean, there's just no other way. But going back a little bit to what I was saying, it was very interesting at the time, Shostakovich writing his symphonies and the operas and all this stuff, and then being denounced. And then all of a sudden he's writing all this film music. And he wrote, I don't know, 20 film scores and stuff. And so people were and he was so diverse in what he did. And so you have, like we had in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, we had Korngold in Hollywood, we had Bernard Herrmann in Hollywood, all these composers who were writing all this music that we know so well, Psycho, and from the films that we know, and pretty amazing careers, and they were hugely prolific and extremely busy. And again, coming back to what I was saying before, the state, obviously in those countries sponsored all these things, and everything was run by the state. As far as payment, I mean, the movie studio could choose which composer, and of course they chose all these excellent ones. Why not? If you've got got these wonderful people. So it's very interesting just to see how we can, possibly mesh everything together. But I think that, again, coming back to, funding, I think the state needs to be woken up a little bit. What Sphinx does is amazing. What an organization like Sistema did is amazing. But if you don't have, some kind of a basis to work with, it's tough.
Well, I also think that like conductors themselves have had a huge effect. I mean, look at Jimmy Conlon bringing back the Theresienstadt composers. I mean, you can, if you want, this music needs champions. It really does. And I think that the champions have to sort of be there to know what's great. That's another thing I think we've lost. I think that artistic directors and I mean, conductors have been there to champion, but I think also artistic directors have to be there to know what's good, to be able to read a score down, play it at the piano, and really know what's going to be effective, and then to get it out there. But I think that these pieces have to have champions. They have to have conductors that are willing to just take it out there and get it played. And I think because as musicians or as orchestral musicians, we can suggest the pieces. I mean, my principal cellist in Amsterdam, Gregor Horsch, was the king. We called him Indiana Jones. The guy would go and he would find the most obscure pieces in little music shops in the middle of nowhere of every country we ever went. And he would find the pieces and then he would play them. But these pieces need that champion.
And the performers are the ones, conductors and soloists. I remember 40 years ago when I was at Juilliard and I was walking out between 67th and 66th and 67th Street, and on the pavement there was, who is Alfred Schnittke? The Russian, and come and find out at Alice Tully Hall, Gidon Kramer, and he was championing, his music at the time. Schnittke wrote music for him, and it's again, and I think we maybe spoke about it in some pre-conversation about Prokofiev going to all of these composers, again, Prokofiev, Levitин, Shostakovich, Miaskovsky, all these men, and taking them by the neck and forcing them to write cello concerti that we now have, and we hear, performed all over the place thanks to one actual person's tenacity.
Tito, what would be your thoughts on we need champions, other words. We need
100%. I mean, that's always been how it is, whether it's a soloist or whether it's a conductor. I mean, you need people that like believe in and want to do the work and play. The other aspect that some people have been touching on is, the fact that there's so much music that of Florence Price, of all different folks who wrote amazing music, that just was never published or never even taken a look at, never even taken seriously. I read every time I learn a new composer whose canon was just left in an attic somewhere, like, nobody picked it up and nobody performed it. It's really sad because are there treasures? Of course there are. Of course, are there things that could be done? Absolutely. And then doing it with the care, like releasing it with that care. Duke Ellington is a known entity. We're going to play Duke Ellington because everybody knows Duke Ellington. It's amazing music, but that material that is available for orchestras is horrendous. I mean, those scores are absolute garbage, and that's because nobody's taken the mantle to like engrave it and make it available and accessible, and so there's that aspect to it as well, that there's a care that needs to be kind of shown by publishers and that's hard, because it's hard to find the people who are championing things in that way as well, in even the administration of this music and trying to get that music out there and affordable for orchestras to be able to perform. That's the other thing too, is that there's some of that where there are issues with money and contracts and all that sort of thing. So, but as far as advocating and being a champion for it, 100%. I mean, any composer will tell you, how do you get performances? You got to befriend performers and try to make that work. And so, but when you talk about Titus, you mentioned the idea of quotas, for lack of a better word, but using a concept of saying, look, if I'm going to make a change, then this amount of my season is going to be composers of, and just committing to it and saying, I'm going to do this and see what happens. You don't have to make a big deal out of it. Just do it and just see what happens, and see if your audience digs it, if they don't, get feedback from. I mean, you can just treat it like any other composer, and try to make it a part of an orchestra's diet and part of the identity of the group. I mean, again, programming is a band-aid if it's not part of a whole value system of the orchestra. It's just one aspect of it. But that's something that can be done. But as I mentioned before, it has to be part of the value system of your organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, this brings us right to our time. Thank you all for all your insight and recommendations. And Alex, let me know when the full church choirs come to sing the Messiah.
I'm talking to my CEO. I'm going to bang on her door.
We'll and be daring, you know, all those out there to program living composers and composers of different backgrounds. We all want to see things that are really changing our institution. So thank you so much, and I will see you. Hopefully, I see you next time in person. So take care, everybody.
Great. Thanks. Thank you.
Bye.